and who's now long been working on Queensland Rail. And he's going to talk to us today about the Logan and the Gold Coast Faster Rail project overview. So over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Adam. So first things first, really nice to hear that the institution is in good health, and particularly what controls my home section. And as Andy pointed out there, so my name's Alex Pugh, work for Queensland Rail in Australia. Started my career here in sunny South Wales, and I've just realised in the last couple of days I've now technically spent 11 more days in Queensland than I did in my career in British Rail, or the British Railways, to put it that way. So as far as the presentation goes, so there's a few thanks to start off with. So first of all, I need to thank the Department of Transport and Main Roads in Queensland. The project is actually a combination of Department of Transport and Main Roads and Queensland Rail, and both have been very supportive. We put together the presentation. It's a very sort of high-profile project in Queensland, so I was very happy when they said yes. You can talk about it, and when Andy accepted the actual offer to talk about the project. So a bit of context. For those of you who've got, everybody knows where Australia is, other side of the planet. It's pretty straightforward. Queensland is basically in the top right-hand corner. So this Australia-wise, it's in the north and eastern side. The numbers, the size of it gets a bit mind-numbing after a while. So for illustration on the slide, so Cairns to Brisbane is about 1,000 miles, so about 1,600 kilometres. So to put it in context, that's a bit like the distance from here in Cardiff to Vienna in Austria. And that's normal. I used to fly back and forwards, do that sort of twice a week. It was certainly joyous, a bit like catching a bus after a while, but yeah, see, the distance gets you after a while. Thankfully, Brisbane to the Gold Coast is only about 50 miles or 80 kilometres. I'll keep on talking, but I think that's what you're used to. And the Logan to Gold Coast, or Logan and Gold Coast Faster Rail project, is actually about 20 kilometres of that line. Next bit, hopefully the video should start with some strange foreigner explains the benefits of Queensland Rail. So I got to say, I put my hand up to do this video. It makes me cringe every time I watch it. However, my work colleagues say I should play it. It sort of tells a little bit about what Queensland Rail do, and it's a bit of self-reflection. I say, I'm uncomfortable. I'm sure the rest of you can have a good laugh. So should work, hopefully. No sound. Is it coming through on the audio on the line? Oops. I'll try that again. It's working. Just hear you. Okay. Try that. Press somewhere. Yeah. I will. Second.
EWI membership saying you need to include media in your.
When you shared it, you clicked it.
My name is Alex Pugh. I'm the project director for Logan and Gold Coast Faster Rail project, and I've been with Queensland Rail since 2007, so 15 years. I was fortunate to have someone who had a job swap in the UK when I worked there, so I had insight into what Queensland was like, and actually what Queensland Rail was like. I'd seen an advert from back of New Civil Engineer for people working in the track style lines in Queensland. So I thought, well, yeah, I'll give it a go, you know. I thought we'd give myself 3 years, but here I am, 15 years later, so 3 years has long passed and I'm happy here. Queensland Rail as an organisation, it's got a nice feel, so it's the right culture, it's vertically integrated, there's all kinds of challenges, all kinds of opportunities. It's just given me the challenge, the variability that I was looking for, and it's actually delivered. Similarities are much greater than the differences of working between here and the UK rail industry. That's the track is just a little narrow. It's 400 millimetres narrow, but apart from that, basic signaling processes, traction, electrification, track engineering, civil engineering, they're very similar. It's the same stuff, but a different place. Just warmer, nicer place. The blue skies, the climate, everything's in close proximity. If you like rainforest. If you want to go camping, you go camping. If you want to go to the beach, you go to the beach. It's just a pleasant place to see. Looking into the 2022 Olympics, we've got a few projects, Logan Gold Coast Faster Rail, Peterborough to Landboard, Project North Side, Brisbane Metro. There's all these projects and the ongoing ETCS, Equals Alliance. If you've got the skills, there's plenty of opportunities and challenges here to actually put them into play in a nice, warm environment with stimulating to use colleagues. I think in summary, from my point of view, if you're considering an opportunity for Queens Rail, my advice would be just give it a go. I look back and I'm so glad I actually did take the chance. I don't look back and leave regrets. I look back and with positivity. So.
There you go. So my cringeworthy part is over. Thank heavens. That's good. And anybody who's ever talked to my wife will realise that my biggest fear was actually the heat. I'm clearly over that. The fact I'm feeling quite cool now says it also. Thanks for that. Slide. Oops.
My name's Alex Pugh. I'm the project director of Logan.
Which one's up and engine? Should be aware of safety screens.
My name's Alex Pugh.
There's no more videos to be happening here.
Let's get back to bit to them before we on the slide.
Yes, that's still needs. Thank you. Right. This is a quick revisit of a previous presentation. I think about 2 years ago, I gave a presentation on the Crossrail Rail project in Queensland. And then key parts here, the fact that prior to COVID, the SEQ's, the South East Queensland population was expected to grow about 2 million. I'll give you an idea, Brisbane's population is existing, so about 2 million. So that's about double over the next 25 years. And also put in context, the whole of Australia's population, I think, is around currently 25, 26 million. So, you know, that's a big increase. Second. Now, most of this growth in the population is to happen outside the Brisbane local government area. But on the flip side, 45% of all the jobs are expected in the CBD in the Brisbane city. Now we've seen an increase in passenger numbers by about 30% in the last 12 months. I'm not quite sure how it's gone in the UK, but post-COVID, we've actually seen passenger numbers jump up. I think it's from like 30 million passenger to 40 million in the last 12 months. And what we expect to see is even more people with more reasons to travel to, from, and through Brisbane. So that's a bit of a background there. I know when I talked about Crossrail 2 years ago, there was that concern about what was going to happen post-COVID. I think Andy may have asked the question at the time and said, you know, what's COVID impact? At the time we were all on Zoom calls, we were all on Teams meetings. And say in the last 12 months, this will be actually let back into an activity. People actually want to get back into the city, which is good. On top of that, just a bit of plug to the Department of Transport on this one. Whilst all of that work was going on, they released the SEQ paper, SEQ Connect. So Queensland as a system is actually, also the SEQ as a system is being changed in the way that I think that they describe as untangling the rail system, the way it goes through Brisbane. At the moment, it has to weave in and out to get from one side of Brisbane to the other. With the tunnel that comes online in the next few years, what it allows us to do is actually change the way the rail is set up in Queensland, particularly in Brisbane. And it's a bit like there's a nice and easy north-south corridor that will go through the tunnel. And that's actually when it goes from the north side towards the Sunshine Coast, through the tunnel and onto the Gold Coast. And I'll talk about Gold Coast a bit. And then at the same time, you have your sort of northeast go to southwest, and northwest go to southeast. But they stay on the surface as they go through Brisbane. I say that's called a sectorised model. So there's three sectors, and then the Logan and Gold Coast Fast Rail project is one of the first projects will be on sector one of that model. So it's needed then to increase capacity post the opening of the Crossing Rail Tunnel. I keep forgetting that. Quite often, apologies. Over its gestation, the Logan and Gold Coast Fast Rail project, key stations in there are Caribbean Bean Lane, so it's often internally, locally, we call it K to B, but it becomes a bit bilingual after a while, but the different elements of the project. Oops, great. Next one's really interesting. So the Australian Australian Railroad Association put this forecast of all the projects in Australia, and it's particularly the ones in Queensland over the next about 10 years. You can see this massive big red block in the middle of it is the Logan and Gold Coast Fast Rail project. A lot of these are ongoing. Many of them in the court system, further up in the state, but the future of rail project development in sort of sectors is positive, incredibly positive. The picture on the bottom left is actually Logan Station. I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. The fact that that in itself is a part of the Logan and Gold Coast Fast Rail project, not the K to B, and it's actually completely moving. The station has to be next to a hospital, actually two hospitals, and a big education centre that moving in, and all that accessibility, moving out the corridor a bit. It's a big slice of the project. Project benefits. So, key part of the Logan and Gold Coast Fast Rail project is just the access between Queensland's economic centres. So, already said the Gold Coast is a big, we call it a suburb. It's a city that's all right to the south of Brisbane. What it's allowed to do is allow people a faster journey time from their place of their home to their place of work into the future. So, connecting key parts of Brisbane, Logan, and the Gold Coast. Key part of that is the safety. So, we're going to get rid of 5 level crossings in the project. So 2 are going to be grade separated, but and as well as that, there's the project goes from 2 tracks to 4 tracks. At the moment, right, there's 2 tracks, and you imagine express trains and stopping trains on the same line. They're all stopping, just stopping. Intent is capacity long term, both meets the demand in the near term and a long term, allow people on express services to get around where they don't need to stop. So, some weird reasons come like this. Right, project features. So as I said before, there's the plan to unlock network capacity, increase journey time. So all the way from Bean Lane to Caribbean. So this is 20 miles long. To give you an idea, it's not, let's say, distance-wise, probably similar to going from Cardiff to Newport, but it's not dead straight. It's weaving in an urban area. There's a lot of curves. There's a lot of property. There's a lot of efficient use of land there. So the plan is, as I said already, to unlock that capacity. About 20 kilometres of new track, so 40 kilometres in total. 5 other cost removals. There's station upgrades. There are 9 stations in total throughout the corridor. Logan is the big location. As I said, it's say 2 hospitals, an education centre, and moving that, say, just increases accessibility for all. You can imagine people wanted to get off the train to the hospital. So part of that. Big part of that is obviously park and ride upgrades as well, about integrate transport models, about actually getting people to use the train. What's alongside is the M1 motorway at the same time. It wasn't as bad as Newport was last the other day, but it's similar sort of logic. It's not unusual to see the M1 pretty congested, and part of the whole strategy is to actually move more people into rail transport. At the same time, active transport corridor, obviously where it's nice and warm, there's a big take up of cycling, walking, so to and from where you want to get to. And the projects includes upgrades of the active transport corridor on its whole length. And then finally, just off the end, I'll do the stadium first, there's a big Ormeo stadium, new stadium yard being created. So the facility will join up being lead and an upgrade of the whole line into ETCS, which I know is relatively sort of run the mill for you guys here, but we're still rolling out across the whole of Brisbane, and it's getting improve safety and improve headways.
You've still got a long way to go with ETCS.
Yeah, there seems to be a common theme. I don't think we've heard anybody who said that it's absolutely perfect, it's all cracked, it's all working, you can buy it off the shelf. I say we're no different. We're working hard again to ease it in that way. Right. As far as the level crossing is concerned, this is probably this is my probably favourite part of it. Obviously, coming from here where there's a lot less level crossings. When you go to Brisbane, there are a lot of level crossings. And there's always the intention to actually remove them as much as possible, mainly for safety reasons, but also obviously transit times help massively. As I say, I know many people who live in these areas, and their biggest complaint is actually they sat in the car at a level crossing waiting for the clear, as well as at the same time, it's not unusual, things like barriers get hit, etc. That causes delays. So the first one is being road at curbing. So at the top here, so nice. I think it's tend to be two roads. I took the dual lane road to across there. That'll be a complete road over rail solution. Trinder Park, that's a Trinder crossings here. There's actually a new alignment there. So let's take the corner off at the same time, move the station along and gets rid of a level crossing at the same time, which is say big improvement. Next one is a particular one that's interesting at Bethania. That way, if you notice that Bethania is effectively this whole area is rail locked, so we actually get rid of the level crossing. It's no longer rail locked. The only way in and out of there is over that level crossing. There's no other way in and out. That would be, say, another one that's planned to have a grade separation. On view, there are options right at the end there that we can actually close that crossing and improve the local road network. Say that it's been sort of integrated transport solution. And finally, spans are on view, but we're looking at that one whether it should be close it or improve the local road network. So there's options there. So I think this is the biggest one when people talk about faster rail as a project being faster. It's from the eyes of anybody who lives in this area, getting from A to B, whether it be on the train or not on the train, is faster as a result of this project. That's the intent. Bit of a project update. This one. Oh, by the way, for those your locals, you may recognise this gentleman here. Maybe Adam. Adam. It's Adam Morgan. So Eric. So this is the current project team. That is not current Queens and Rolling Stock. That is the heritage fleet that we're doing a bit of familiarisation. We've learned a lot on that actual trip, getting Design House, Department of Transport project team, the Queens and Rail, all the consultants in one space, and actually an appreciation of the project and what's going on. So we're at the moment. So I talked a little about Logan Lee Station relocation. It's an early cab off the rank for it. It's key to other parts of the Crossrail Rail project. And the design of that has been done early, been done by our consultants, and then with a construct-only type arrangement in the next few years. We're finalising what we're calling the Logan and Gold Coast, which is the whole 20 project, refined reference design, finalising that. Ongoing all the time, since continual the environmental approvals, you can imagine, especially with like in the park. There are things like sensitive environmental areas from a wildlife point of view, surveys, what's gone before, so indigenous sort of challenges, so actually respected of what's been before, and so there's no assessment that's ongoing all the time. So we're getting in the corridor. One of the person that's been on the project the longest actually is the property person. So obviously there's a lot of effort in that actually acquiring properties on the corridor, and that I think is managed well by the Department of Transport. They do a good job of that. So, next one, as I say, it's quite welcome to have the Department of Transport actually approach Queen's Rail quite early on and enjoy our collaboration with this. We went to industry about 12 months ago to actually understand whether we were approaching this project in the right manner. And the industry's feedback was along the lines, well, we're going to need Queen's Rail on board, otherwise it's going to be rather difficult to deliver, particularly in a brownfield environment. And then the last part is, so that those community engagements, they're ongoing all the time. It's very important to let the community know what we're doing for all these assets, and in fact, impacts them all. And that's happening now towards the end of this year. We get towards, I don't think it ever stops, but it just keeps on. Yeah. Area of focus. But let's see, I've talked about this already, but Logan station locations, say, detailed design almost finalised, construct on the contract, expect to release late this year, just before Christmas. Right, whilst I'm here back in Australia, Queensland, they have released some of the contract packages that invite invitations out to industry to come and bid for this. This is the first one, the construct only. So, hence why I can't say masses of detail, but key scope of it, brand spanking new station, building out platforms, pedestrian station motorway right across the top. Bear in mind, this is going to end up being alongside 2 hospitals and an education facility, so tertiary education. And then a big increase on the park and ride facilities to get about anybody with transport. So that was what we call it. We've called LSR, so Logan Station Location. The Logan and Gold Coast, the actual faster rails, the bigger project. In the last 12 months, 18 months, finalising reference design. Again, the procurement is very tight. We recognise the fact that the project originally, its drivers were increased capacity. Clearly, with the 2032 Olympics being announced in Brisbane, that corridor that goes from the Sunshine Coast to the Gold Coast is key. That's one of the main ways to get people from different events to the other. We'll have the tunnel finished, but then we obviously need the capacity increases to actually supplement the tunnel. So that becomes next year. We're expecting it to be collaborative design. So, apology. The rail package is an alliance model. So that will involve Queen's Rail, Department of Transport, probably a major contractor. There's always an emphasis on the project as well to try and involve what we call the tier 2 contractors as well, not just sticking with tier 1s. So it's important. And the same way, there's 2 grade separations I've talked before about at Bethania and at Kirriby. They're going to look at a collaborative design and construct model, which is related to the Department of Transport and seems to be successful elsewhere, different types of project. Where are we now? Interesting. So at the moment, so project launch was just over 2 years ago. So feels like yesterday for me. Yeah. Consultation finished in the same year. We are in that design planning stage, and at the moment, running in parallel is the procurement activity and the final approvals for the design and delivery from both state and federal government. I'm sure the question will come out about the actual cost, so I might as well say now is at the moment it's funded to the tune of $2.6 billion. And that's split 50-50 at the moment between the Queen's state government and the federal to the Australian government. So finally, the key challenges and opportunities for the project. So the community outcomes. So as I said already, there's the need to have the safer, faster, and more convenient journey times from door to door. That's a key part of the community. This is not about trains running through at 200 km an hour. This is actually about improving the community's transport from door to door. An opportunity to lean on our previous experience to minimize disruption. What disruption management, what we built across the rail, the original intent was to absolutely not next to no shutdowns of any stations, only one at a time, and quite quickly realised the fact that there was an openness to actually more stations to be shut down at any one time, as long as it's well communicated, understood, consult the community. So we're leaning on that learning from Across the Rail to actually help inform this project of what we can and can't do in the future. Network interfaces is an interesting one. So it's interesting. Transport roads have got a great, experience of dealing both for Treasury, Canberra, say federal politics for us. Their road experience, their interface with third-party providers, services, etc. And Queensland has got Queensland Rail has got a good experience doing that in the rail corridor. So actually blending those two teams together is adding great value. So the stakeholder requirements, we realised the fact that to get on board early was the key to engage and to identify and record the stakeholder requirements early on to deliver expectation, particularly from a rail operations point of view. So Queensland Rail is an integrated railway, so we have rail operations on board to say, okay, so what this is going to look like at the end, how we can look at the trains on this improved pattern network, what about integrated modes and things like that. So having those people on board nice and early has been excellent. And actually that they can then help define what the outcome is, say, drive the project in the right direction. But customer expectations is pretty, it's a big learning curve. All I can say on this one is it just never seems to stop. Just the continuum, the need to actually, just because the customer said that's on day one, doesn't mean day two, day three, day four, year one, year two, etc. I'm going to change going forward. So we've accepted that. In fact, it's important to listen and take on board people's feedback and how they feel about the project. And the last one about innovative solutions. I think we've all been reading some of the latest text, particularly on the Crossrail here in London, and had a lot of learnings from that. And some things we picked up is sometimes being predictable and doing lots of the little things well is actually innovative in its own right. Actually getting the basics right and doing the little things again and try not to do crazy. What we try to do is the best as possible learn from others, whether it be from the procurement point of view, from a design point of view, from a production point of view, and trying to avoid wherever possible any bespoke solutions. And that been shit. So I was going to open for questions if any questions had come in, James.
No, not yet.
No questions.
Oh,
Well, not online.
I guarantee one person asked a question. It's
yeah, to get through the consultation in a year.
Yeah.
Seems in Britain that would take like 10 years. You know, nobody wants it and all the rest of it. So what is the general public's feeling about what this is doing? And clearly the state government and the national government are investing a huge amount of money in rail over the coming years. So is that well received? Is that?
I think the other thing is, my understanding is the first ideas of the project people involved with 2007, 2009. So maybe I shouldn't forget the fact that actually whilst the project business case onwards, a detailed business case I think was around 3 years ago, 2020. Yeah, the bit better right. But people involved in the project much earlier than that, particularly from a transport strategy point of view. I think they've done a good job of actually explaining why it's needed and actually saying, look, you know, this is one of those projects that's not just about the Olympics. It was always needed about improving capacity across the network and actually quicker journey times. I think there's an acceptance that from the community, from the population, the fact that, you know, those who want to work in the inner city of Brisbane, you say if you sat on the M1, it's only there's a lot of news about being sat on the M1. There's a lot of news about these trains being quite crowded, so therefore getting greater capacity, getting greater quicker journey times made to be. So the answer thing is yes, it's generally positive. Obviously, you always have that individuals are impacted by it. They seem to have an exception, and that's been sort of. So I guess well managed. I think it's just been communicated well, talked, listened, understood, and answered where appropriate. So I'm not sure that's the question.
Your sort of question, Sam.
Go on.
Yeah. You're improving capacity, so what's the operational remit? I mean, are you increasing train lengths, increasing speeds through turnouts, the interface between 2-track and 4-track? How are you going to achieve that with station loops or flying loops? Is that, what's the
Straightforward. The proposal on this, Jim, is say because it's all part of alliance, it's open to say, oh, by the way, alliance partners, if you want to come up with a better solution, that's fine. But the premise is basically 2 other tracks will be express, the 2 other tracks will be stoppers. And mainly, sort of the crossover opportunities are sort of Beanley and sort of Kirby end, one in the middle, sort of at Logan League, or sort of junction of sort, but not then. But that's the part we're looking to solve with the operations team. Say, look, what do you want? What do you need, should I say, to allow this to run as well as possible? Also, some kind of consideration of degraded mode states. So, what happens if something goes wrong? What happens if the train gets stranded, etc., etc. But at the same time, recognizing that in itself introduces some unreliability, so or a weakness in the system. So, what should I say? I'm not quite sure looking at the question.
so stations will be 4-track, 4-platform or 2-platform?
The main ones are the intermediates, not necessarily. So there's the main ones that again are open to offer, not offers, but open to the alliance to actually come up with better solutions at the moment. So being the Caribbean with that, you know, so it's
Big stations, generally island platform.
yeah. So there's a whole question there about what's the optimum solution about putting 2 island platforms, how to in that type of thing. So I think part of the intent, I think, is having there've been comments made about having island platforms to load transfer from the express to the stopping trains without lifts, etc., and things like that. Oh, sorry.
What's the, sorry, I missed it. Is it diesels?
No,
trains.
electric, yeah, sorry. No. So the Queen's system, I think, was electrified in the 1980s.
Right.
So yeah, it's all 25,000 volts. So yeah, it's true. And generally 6-car sets. So it's not an intent to actually change to train that. We do look at things like thinking about, okay, so what would the future hold? So you don't actually we don't actually design into a corner, but actually to sort of lock you into a future, any development in the future, that's great. But yeah, 6-car sets.
To go to 12 or to go to 9?
There's it's a bit of rock solid, but I think there's a recognition that in the future, if you wanted to upgrade, it would be looking at 9s, but not. We're not. The project's not designed for 9. The project's designed for 6. So obviously, think about that. What would 9 look like? Maybe. Because of course, you got the rolling stock to go with.
Yeah.
Questions? Is there any provisions on freight?
Good question. That's a pretty good question. Homeview sidings is actually alongside an abattoir or oil treatment. So it's actually the only freight on it is at the moment it's cattle trains. So cattle trains come in from sort of regional Queens and come into Homeview for treatment. So the intention was, so that's one of the challenges of the project to actually look at particularly how ETCS works. Obviously, ETCS working on all of the passenger trains is well and truly within scope, it makes sense. But we have third-party operators, whether they're fitted, etc., is a challenge to the project. But the answer is yes, but it is dominated from being a passenger point of view. So we are talking to operators about freight lines, but the priority is passengers. So two-legged type.
It's been a number of hybrid schemes in Europe recently looking at that because in Rome, for instance, the local trains all operate using ETCS at quite tight intervals, but the decision was made to provide signalling as well. So things like freight trains and indeed some of the interregional trains just run through a small on-normal signalling. They don't use the ETCS. So they lose capacity by doing it, but they increase flexibility of buying, allowing other trains to pass through, so.
I think I've seen Greece in that respect is more the fact that I think it's relatively infrequent, the freight trains, so they tend to be sort of quite peaky certain times of the year, obviously, you know, when in line with the agricultural needs, it's sort of like lifestyle needs.
You mentioned something about environmental concerns. Apologies for being late.
No,
What sorts of species that we're talking about here?
oh wow, everything you can imagine on one of those Australian sort of pubs. It's just like yeah, so obviously it's no crocodiles, but basic koala habitat. It's probably the biggest one, and then yeah, it's a problem. You get used to it. So to what used to be unusual for me, so when I first went, so you know, koalas interesting, wallabies interesting, because now it's not that you've seen them everywhere, but yeah, it's quite leafy through the Trinder Park area in particular. I can't remember the name of it. It's a bit of like a forestry area, and yes, so looking after the koala population there, and normal environmental approvals. So just going through, you know, what is it, you know, Australia's a pretty green country. I know it looks like torched earth, but ironically, some of the stuff is a Brisbane quite leafy.
Very good, like some great breasted ewes, and
No, there's certain types of possum like that. So I don't profess to be an environmental expert, but I can think of a few people I could ask the question. And yeah, I think more koalas than anything else.
So you were saying this is key to the Olympics as well.
Yeah. So we've got, I think, project expectation is we can sort of, we need to be out of the way before obviously, I think generally in year 2012, I mean, what was the, I guess the expectation here was it was out of the way by 2010, 2011 to allow the actual, you know, the Olympics to plan and do the work. It's no different for us. The expectation to get out, you know, get out of the way, basically, of Olympics.
Yeah, so the projects available for the traffic.
And some of the challenges we're actually seeing with so the industry, of course, is we're not the only project that's actually fighting for what's the same key critical resource. So I mentioned Beer Bones and Amble, that's on the north side, that's going over to the Sunshine Coast. Obviously, the ETCS is a separate project, but closely aligned to it, as you said. And some of the other ones, they're all part meant to, so that strategy document pulls them all together and say how they will feed both Second Queensland, but just so happens to be that they'll do the same role for the Olympics, just a little bit earlier than what we expected. So.
More general point was obviously this is an urban suburban network.
Yeah.
How's rail travel doing generally? Because in Europe, we've now, I believe, breaking out of it because they don't seem to be doing anything. So touch the screen on it. So there's been a, on the virtual screen, or big council. Yeah, that's fine. So,
But that's what it is. We've said, you should have said, Alex, put your glasses on and click the button that says
next thing.
So do you need a Windows K again?
It's turned off on the switch. You need to turn it on the bottom right. Button to press. There underneath. That's itself.
Green. Not me.
So I say in Europe, particularly our long distance route was very much back in vogue.
Yeah.
We've got the sleeper trains that restarting. Some people are finding the horror of Pugh shares, but they weren't quite expected. But is there any sort of moves in Queensland or Australia to start doing more into urban?
I think, look, Queensland has the spirit of Queensland, goes up the North Coast one. So all the way from, so it's funny, I put that slide up earlier on to show distance. It runs all the way to Cairns. So it's diesel powered all the way to Cairns and it's electrified to Rockhampton, which is about halfway. That's exactly what you described. The seats are a mix of sort of quite comfortable reclining seats, and there's the classic, there's pods that you see in airplanes these days. It's sort of, so I've traveled around about 10 years ago, I think it was fantastic, and it's upgraded now and then. So I think that's always well, Patrick's good on the tilt trains. As far as SEQ is concerned, I think the focus is more about actually being able people to give that option to turn up and go. So every 15-minute service, turn up at any station, so people stop actually looking at what the timetable is. Turn up the station between, I think, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And when 15 minutes you get service. I know on the line I live on, at peak times it's every 7 minutes. So it's almost like the tube. Because Brisbane's train system is almost like this schizophrenic, as in, it's metro, but also sort of like a tube system at the same time. So it's quite a challenge. As far as I think the expectation is so that you have that peak period of turn up and go, and then for the people who are trying to commute in longer distances, for instance, from Gold Coast or Sunshine, give that option to actually reduce their travel time.
Yeah, right. Cutting out stops and things.
Yeah. So I like the tilt trains. I like the tilt trains.
Any more questions?
See more for any more.
Anyone online?
I was waiting for a technical question, which I was going to struggle with.
Right.
All good.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you all.
So, first of all, can everyone make sure they've signed the attendance sheet, which is circulating. We had the notes from the last meeting in that. So, any issue arising from that? Okay, take that as. So, I'd like to call upon Andrew to vote the place of thanks.
Alex. Thanks.
We won't stand for another camera.
Oh, we're not standing on the camera. Yeah. That got me in focus. Alex, thanks for coming all the way back from Australia to give us a talk tonight.
Yep.
I was in Brisbane about 11 years ago, and I don't think we ever really met, but I was working on Kiwa's coal projects, and I found Brisbane an absolutely fascinating city, spending 6 months in Perth and about 6 months in Brisbane. Where I would call home probably is Perth, but the remembrances of Brisbane, where I ended up, were very, very pleasant indeed. Great time. And you came about 2 years ago and gave us a talk on the tunnel. This is an extension going southbound from that towards the Gold Coast, which I went to one time and thoroughly enjoyed myself. Just one day wandering about. Australia's a fantastic country, fantastic continent to explore, and huge by British standards. So thanks for coming and explaining what's going on down there. For people that want to try it, yes, I'd recommend it, even if you want to come back in the end.
Even if it's a short while, people do come back.
Yes.
Yeah. So on behalf of everybody here, everybody online, I'd like to offer a vote of thanks and say thanks very much indeed. Can you come back in a couple more years' time and give us an update again?
Well, yeah, with pleasure. I'd love to. Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed.
Before I close the meeting, our next meeting is on the 9th of October. It'll be Anthony Moyle from KGJ Price talking about the lightweight and the base plates. Then on November the 13th, we have Mike Smith, who's the regional structures engineer, coming to talk about the Union Viaduct emergency bridge repairs. So that should be, I think, quite an interesting talk. And then on the 11th of December, we've got basalt reinforcement in the rail industry by Malcolm Newton Thursday. So that sounds a lot fascinating as well. So, okay, so if there's no further, do you close the meeting? Good.
A few thanks from people online, Alex. Gareth Holt would be remembered to. Say hello. Get to that shot, but just go put it in.
Right. Stop.
Yeah,
Yeah, stop sharing.
yeah, it should have started recording that. Teams.
I do it remote, just that.
But you could do it off there, and I'm very down. It's okay. Stop the call.
They won't let me do it.
Should stop it.
It's just the key to do it.
You send them, people just drop an egg and then roll the stuff.
Mothership's not control.
Yeah, but the mothership's from home. Maybe I've just not so Mothership, I've got all the other
It is, I think they tend to just leave it on. If they haven't given us, turn it, just runs on. So,
When we pull the camera out,
yeah,
Leave them.
so. And they've got the glasses and some rods.
It's got a mothership. What do you think?
Yeah,
Leave. Yeah, okay.